Hello, welcome to Dev Radio. I am here with Willy Schaub, who's one of our Microsoft Azure Developer Influencers, and his colleague, Martin Lacey. Together, they're two of the three authors of the Continuous Integration and Delivery Pipelines Cookbook. I'll let them introduce themselves, but I know they've both got a ton of experience and a ton of wisdom here about a topic that I know this audience is very passionate about. Shipping software faster, better, and happier. I think that's kind of the key to DevOps. Willy, why don't you go first? Tell us about yourself and WorkSafe BC and in your book.
Thanks, Matt, for inviting us. So I'm a software engineer at heart, and I have the privilege of leading the team responsible to unify people, processes, and products to create a robust software development lifecycle at WorkSafe BC. And yeah, we wrote this book as kind of to support our open source project as well, which is on GitHub, where we shared all the blueprints. We also wanted to share the good, the bad, and the evil of what we've learned around the SDLC. And yeah, it's got some cool stuff in there. We shared a lot of the source code of kind of tough nuts we had to crack. Also source code of some of the gremlins, the gotchas that we encountered. So I hope there's a lot to not to learn, but to share in that book.
Yeah, no, I found it very readable and very practical so far. I haven't actually deployed anything using the cookbook yet, but Martin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you come to be here?
Sure. Well, just as a side note on that, it is all open source, so you can download it and start playing with it right away.
Yeah.
I'm Martin Lacey, software engineer, true blue at heart. I've been doing software engineering since I was 13. I got exposed to it at an early age. My father worked for Hewlett Packard, so I got access to lots of technology, lots of computers, and lots of system thinking from a very early age. I worked with Willy as the software engineering practice lead. It took me 45 years to get to this point. So lots of R&D experience, lots of different industry experience, some commercial, some non-commercial, some government, but always on the leading and bleeding edge of implementing what is needed by the user community. And this idea of creating the cookbook for CI/CD is really impactful for WorkSafe BC as well as the community at large. The whole idea of automating and documenting how to automate a software factory and create that infrastructure where everyone knows how it works and how all the flows go is critical, and automating it all the way. So that's kind of the real fun part of bringing this to life.
Yeah, and I'm actually trying to hold back on some of the specific things from the book that you make me think of while you're talking. But I'm gonna try to stay with the outline that we agreed to.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much in there that is really cool, and where we're going next is also a compelling story. But
which is kind of development standards problem, right? Like, oh, I want to go off and do this cool stuff, but let's stay on the road here.
Yeah, and that's real dynamic, right? You're excited to be in a new place, but you have to make sure that it's well constructed.
Totally. What were so I'll start with Willy. The question that we've got for you. What were some of the key goals of the the V2 of CI/CD blueprints? What did you want to do with this piece?
So the objectives for the blueprints are really to promote consistency, standardization, security, and simplicity. Kind of the 4 pillars that my team is already sick and tired of because they hear it every day. But the goal is really to automate the routine tasks, improve productivity, amplify the engineers, and allow them to focus on delivery, or rather allow them to focus on value delivery, rather than being distracted by infrastructure, process, and product provisioning.
Yeah.
We also want to replace the labor-intensive and costly classic Azure pipelines with template-based, reusable, and efficient Azure pipelines. which is what we refer to as the CI/CD blueprints.
I think making that jump to, the sort of, infrastructure as code, putting all of your blueprints into code, into documents. That's that's a big leap, actually. And I'll bounce around a little bit. I can't stick too much to the script. And throughout the book, I think like you've got the one, there's one moment where you're talking about the epic fail of you thought that everyone would go along with the idea, and they just didn't. And you're writing from the vision of hindsight. How did it go? What was the easy parts? What were the hard parts? How did you get people to buy into this idea?
Well, the hard part was really changing processes and products. The technology is straightforward, but altering people's mindset is really complex and challenging. So the version 1 templates, as you mentioned, we had some turbulence, as we described in the books. They didn't succeed because they focused on innovative features rather than addressing practical needs, and did not involve the engineers on the ground.
Yeah.
So when they finally started using them, it resulted in diverse and resource-intensive pipelines, and really a lack of engineering support, i.e. we did not have the support of the engineers we were trying to enable.
Yeah.
So to address this, and we kind of cover it to a degree in the book as part of the learnings, it's really important to engage all stakeholders, to introduce the key goals, the why. I mean, why are we doing this? And also like the objectives that I mentioned, like standardization and automation, and evolving templates and pipelines together. So early empowerment, shift left, and prioritizing value over cool stuff is now key in our team. Whereas before we focused on the cool stuff. So that's about the pipelines. The one thing I want to sneak in for anybody that actually gets into a journey of writing a book, I think if your question would have been, what would you have done different with the book? I would say I would have published it a lot sooner, because we got into a review paralysis. That was such a draining experience. We were just reviewing and reviewing and reviewing. At some point, we the three of us said, okay, just close the gate and ship it. So if you find typos or spelling errors in there, which is very unlikely after all these reviews, my apology. But yeah, we had to get to a point where we just said, we need to ship it and share our learnings, which is really the number one priority of what we wanted to achieve.
Yeah. I think one of the things while you're talking, I was thinking about this in the book is trying to get people to be consistent, and which is hard if everyone's going off and doing the cool thing, but also like you can't automate unless it's consistent. And if people want to automate, then like that's going to make your life better. So just let's all be consistent here. So Martin, I'm kind of leaning over to you. So automation, CI/CD automation. It might sound like a basic question for some of the audience, but how does that just enhance the whole SDLC, the software development lifecycle? Why is automation so important, other than happy devs?
Well, you hit the nut on the nail on the head, where you have to have buy-in from the developers, and they have to see the value of what they're getting into, and so when we talk about automation, what point does it touch the developers, and how does that enhance their lives? And knowing that there's lots of controls in the environment to actually deploy and deliver software, and of course standards and consistency if you want to be able to move one project to the next, from one team to the next, or one technology to the next, you have to actually have a good landing spot to rest into, and having that fluidity of understanding what the technology baseline is and how the standards, how things are being built and constructed in a pattern-based way, helps the developer to understand more readily when they're dropped into the middle of a new development system. And the CI/CD pipeline is the backbone, the infrastructure for all the applications. So they all go through the similar process, similar flow. So when they dive into a new application or in sustainment and helping to support an existing application, their friction to adoption is much less. And if the infrastructure is all patterned and they know the patterns, then they don't have to worry about how their code moves from one environment to the next and what security reviews are done and what best practices are required. Those are also part of the blueprints themselves and the validation processes built into the pipelines to ensure that they're following the standards. So it's a win-win basis to make sure that if they're following the blueprints, then the blueprints help them move their code along in a standard-based pattern, and it makes it more readily adoptable for sustainment teams to come along and change it, and the knowledge is shared much more readily. So it's basically reducing the friction and trying to create that flow. And once the developers understand that whole ecosystem, the whole infrastructure, it becomes a factory landscape, and they know how and where to pull the levers to make sure that their software makes it from their local development environment through all the various stages and through all the various gates to make it to production as a high quality piece of software.
Yeah. You talk about moving fast, and you've got a lot of road metaphors in the book. From I was talking just before the video started, about talk about logging roads,
our paved roads, our paved roads, guardrails, and the bricks, right? Made of bricks.
Well, I think so. Like again, one idea that struck me in the book is autonomy with guardrails. You're going over a bridge, you want to go fast, you don't want to fall over the side. And you introduce it with the idea that it's about, people, there's people, process, and tools, and the people part is kind of like 80% of the work. Both who has to do the work and the work to do.
And unleashing that creativity, right? You don't want to constrain people from being creative and doing what they think is their value add. Yeah. So there's that whole balance.
Yeah, autonomy with guardrails.
Yeah.
And I mean, just say just a little bit more about that, because it's something that, like, managers like, okay, great, I want guardrails. And how did you guys get there? When did you know it was the desired state, and when did you know you were getting close?
Give that to you, Willy.
Yeah, this is really a great topic, and unfortunately, the response, Matt, is we are close, but we're not quite there yet. In a nutshell, autonomy obviously drives energy and it fosters innovation. That's the one side. On the other side, as an enterprise organization, we require governance to ensure that both our methods of building solutions and the solutions themselves adhere to industry standards, internal policies, and regulatory frameworks. These tongue twister words. And because we are in the public sector, we have a few more policies than some of the other organizations have to deal with. So initially, we said, DevOps teams, autonomy is your friend, go. And that led to the creation of what we refer to as snowflakes. For example, a variety of inconsistent pipelines emerged from everywhere. This obviously resulted in an imbalanced ratio as well, because we have over 5,000 pipelines today, and we have hundreds of solutions. And I'll leave it up to you to do the calculation, because something is off there. So it's the autonomy, unfortunately, introduced significant complexity, operational overhead, and if we now talk to the stakeholders, cost. And that undermines the efficiency of our DevOps practices that we are trying to establish. Now, Martin hears me say this all the time, is we are enablers, not enforcers.
Yeah.
So my team's role is to provide early warnings in the CI/CD pipeline and helping teams to identify and fix issues proactively. This just results in a smoother, automated process through security and quality review where enforcement occurs.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like crossing a bridge. You refer to it as a bridge. I like the analogy of a bridge. It's like crossing a bridge safely between the guardrails. That is our job, is making sure that you cross that bridge safely before reaching border control on the other side, which is where the enforcement will take place. They will tell you, no, you will not enter because, and you will then say, why didn't anybody tell me that I'm not allowed to use .NET 9? So
it was so much easier.
But now it's out of date. Dang.
So, the measures we use is stakeholder satisfaction, risk reduction, and cost savings, which is also temporary tattoo we've created for our team, so we remember that. And most importantly, eliminating security review failures, which stall development. So it's one of the measures is really how many times did teams get to the border crossing and they were turned back? That's bad. How do we avoid that? So with a standardized, secure, and everything is code, and here we come with as code setup, we are able to deliver value quickly and actually foster the innovation and empower our engineers because they are code friendly. They have no idea when you talk about a classic Azure pipeline. You give them a YAML template and they are happy because they can actually read it, they can understand it, and they can change it. They can submit a pull request and say, I don't really like this blueprint. I would like you to add XYZ. Here's a pull request with the changes. And here we go with autonomy again. So we are actually also enabling autonomy for them again. They can actually contribute to change. But enough with the rambling. Martin, you pointed my way. So what do you think?
Can you rephrase the question?
We sort of bring it towards a conclusion. Real quickly, there's links in the description. One link where you can get the book. I'll also mention that one of the reasons to get this book is the proceeds go to a really awesome wildlife rehabilitation, the Owl Foundation, that helps raptors who've been injured, live their lives as raptors. But Martin, I'll rephrase the question as, how do you wake up in the morning and know it's time for you to go pick up the CI/CD cookbook, Pipelines cookbook? When is it time for that? Who should pick this up?
Well, I would say teams that are actually trying to move up the chain, trying to automate their infrastructure. They've run into continuous problems with supporting each other, how things move, and they've got a large number of applications, and it's basically a dog food show. When they want to try and create some harmony and have a nice flow, and they're tired of the chaos, moving things from one environment to the next and not knowing who to deal with and how to move the code through and how it actually gets there. It's that kind of level of enlightenment, knowing not just what's happening at your desk, but what's happening in the entire factory floor. So that's the level of insight. When you're ready to move from, got a little bit of blinders on, I'm just doing my thing, to, okay, this is how the factory operates. Now I can actually influence how the next team works, the next environment gets my stuff. I can actually influence the chain of events in the pipeline, in the flow of code in my factory. And that level of participation, that level of autonomy, and yet impactful contribution to the factory processes. That's a level up, where you're not just focused on what the feature is, but how the ecosystem works with your features and your whole vision.
Yeah, actually, that's a great answer. That's pretty exciting. You guys, thank you so much for taking the time today. Thank you for investing the years it took to learn what it took to write this book. And thank you for writing the book.
Thank you very much, Matt. Thank you for the time.
Cool.
Thank you very much for the chat, Matt. It's great to see you again.
Cool. Take care.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.